Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. Viktor Rubtsov, an experienced policeman, goes to a family house in the mountains to find peace after a serious operation, but his privacy is violated by a family claiming to have rented a house. The conflict escalates into threats and a legal battle. Viktor Rubtsov's family cabin was more than just a structure, it was a legacy. Tucked deep within the craggy embrace of a mountain range, the wooden retreat stood like a monument to resilience, surrounded by towering pines and ancient oaks. Its weathered logs bore the marks of decades of mountain weather, each crevice and knot telling stories of storms endured and seasons past. Built by Viktor's great-grandfather with little more than his hands and sheer determination, the cabin had been a refuge for generations. For Viktor, it was a sanctuary, a place to shed the burdens of his badge and reconnect with the simplicity of nature. The cabin sat in isolation, miles from the nearest neighbor and even farther from the bustling chaos of the nearest town. The forest around it was alive, yet serene, a symphony of rustling leaves and birdsong that seemed to hush the rest of the world. Paths worn into the forest floor by Viktor's ancestors meandered through the woods, leading to hidden clearings, sparkling streams, and breathtaking views. Here, the concerns of city life faded, replaced by the eternal rhythm of the wild. It was late spring, and the mountain air carried the crispness of lingering frost mixed with the warmth of new life. The trees were dressed in vibrant green, their leaves shimmering like emeralds in the early morning sun. A light breeze whispered through the forest, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth, an aroma Viktor found more restorative than any therapy session. It was Sunday morning, the day stretching before him like an untouched canvas. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't rushing to a crime scene or drafting reports. Today was his day to simply exist. Viktor sat on the wide wooden porch, a steaming mug of coffee cradled in his hands. The chair beneath him creaked slightly as he leaned back, his eyes scanning the landscape. Beyond the grassy clearing that surrounded the cabin, the forest stood as a natural fortress, its dense canopy dappling the ground with sunlight. Wildflowers dotted the clearing, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the earthy tones of the cabin and its surroundings. This was a place where time seemed to slow, allowing Viktor to savor each moment. The past few weeks had been relentless. Viktor, a seasoned police officer known for his unyielding integrity, had led a high-stakes operation to dismantle a dangerous criminal network. The case had been grueling, pushing him to the brink both physically and mentally. Yet, through it all, he had maintained his composure, driven by a sense of duty and an unwavering moral compass. The operation's success had brought a sense of accomplishment, but it had also left him drained, his mind heavy with the weight of decisions made under pressure. Here, in the quiet of the mountains, he sought reprieve. The cabin's creaky floorboards and the scent of aged wood felt like an embrace, a reminder that some things remained unchanging. Today, his goals were simple: fix a loose hinge on the pantry door, patch a crack in the window frame, and perhaps take a walk along the trails he'd explored as a boy. These small tasks were a far cry from the life-or-death decisions of his career, but they brought a sense of grounding he desperately needed. As the sun climbed higher, its rays kissed the cabin's roof, casting long shadows across the clearing. Viktor allowed himself a rare smile, the corners of his mouth lifting as he took another sip of coffee. The morning promised peace, a balm for his weary soul. Little did he know, the stillness was only an interlude, a fragile veneer over the storm that was about to break. The crunch of tires on gravel broke the tranquil symphony of the forest, jarring Viktor from his thoughts. He straightened in his chair, his senses sharpening as the sound grew louder. Moments later, a sleek black SUV rolled into view, its glossy exterior starkly out of place against the rustic backdrop of the cabin. The vehicle came to a halt in the clearing with a jarring screech, throwing up a cloud of dust that hung in the air like an unwelcome intruder. Viktor's first thought was confusion. Visitors were rare out here. The isolation of the cabin was one of its greatest appeals. Rising from his chair, he set his coffee mug down on the porch railing, his gaze fixed on the vehicle as the driver's door swung open. Out stepped a woman, her every movement radiating entitlement. She was impeccably dressed in white slacks and a tailored blouse, her designer sunglasses reflecting the cabin like a silent critique. Her expression, a mix of irritation and superiority, told Victor everything he needed to know. This woman wasn't here by accident. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp and impatient. "Is this 314 Mountain View Road?" Before Victor could respond, the passenger door opened, and a large, broad-shouldered man emerged. He moved with deliberate heaviness, his imposing frame accentuated by the tight fit of his polo shirt. His expression was less refined than the woman's, but no less hostile. Two teenagers followed, a boy and a girl, both dragging their feet as though they'd rather be anywhere else. The boy kicked at a rock, while the girl kept her eyes glued to her phone, her disinterest palpable. Victor stepped forward, his tone polite but firm. "This is private property. Can I help you?" The woman scoffed, removing her sunglasses with a dramatic flourish. "Private property? I don't think so. My husband and I rented this cabin for the week." She pulled out her phone, waving it like a badge of authority. "I have the confirmation right here." Victor frowned, his confusion deepening. There must be a mistake. This cabin isn't available for rent. It belongs to my family, and we've never listed it as a rental. Her expression hardened, and her tone turned icy. "Listen, we've been driving for hours. I have an email that says this place is ours for the week. So why don't you hand over the keys and stop wasting our time?" The man stepped closer, his size and stance designed to intimidate. "Yeah, buddy. Don't make this a problem. We paid good money for this place." Victor remained calm, his years of training keeping his emotions in check. "I'm sorry you've been misled, but this is private property. You'll need to contact whoever you booked through to resolve this." The woman's face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. Do you even know who I am? I have contacts who could make your life very difficult." Victor met her gaze evenly. "Ma'am, I'm only telling you the facts. This property isn't for rent. I need you to leave." Her response was a harsh laugh, dripping with disdain. "Leave? We're not going anywhere. This is our vacation, and we're staying right here." Victor's patience, though vast, was beginning to wear thin. The stillness of the forest now felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension that promised trouble ahead. The situation teetered on the edge of chaos as Karen's face twisted into an expression of pure fury. "Listen here," she hissed, stepping closer to Victor, her heels crunching against the gravel. "We've had enough of your nonsense. Hand over the keys, or there will be consequences." Her voice, now low and threatening, dripped with venom. Behind her, Artie loomed larger, his hands balled into fists at his sides. His movements were deliberate, calculated to intimidate. He stepped forward, casting a shadow over Victor. "You're just some glorified guard, right? We paid for this place fair and square, so get out of our way." Victor's demeanor remained unflappable. His voice, steady and calm, cut through the rising tension. "I'm a police officer," he stated firmly, making sure every word landed. "This is private property. If you cannot provide evidence of your claim, I need you to leave." "Now," Karen sneered, her lip curling. "You think that scares me? You're nothing. You don't know who you're messing with." She reached into her jacket pocket, and before Victor could react, she pulled out a folding knife. The blade gleamed in the sunlight as she flicked it open with a practiced motion. Karen's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Give us the keys, or I'll make sure you regret it. You won't even see it coming." Victor's gaze didn't waver. Years of training kicked in, his muscles tensing as he assessed the threat. He knew the situation had just shifted from verbal posturing to imminent danger. Behind Karen, Artie moved to flank him, his massive frame positioning itself for a potential ambush. The teenagers stood frozen, their faces pale as the confrontation escalated. Victor spoke, his tone unwavering. "Drop the knife. Now." Karen laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think you're in control here?" She spat, taking a step forward. Victor didn't flinch. His hand moved with precision to his sidearm, drawing it in one smooth motion. He leveled the weapon at her, his voice sharp and commanding. "Put the knife down. I won't say it again." For a moment, the clearing was silent, the tension crackling like static in the air. Karen's bravado faltered, her grip on the knife tightening. "You wouldn't dare," she snarled, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. When Karen lunged, Victor reacted with precision. His foot shifted, his arm extended, and with a swift motion he disarmed her, the knife clattering to the ground. In the same motion, he twisted her arm behind her back, forcing her to the ground. Karen screamed in protest, her voice shrill as she thrashed against his hold. Artie roared, charging at Victor, but Victor, anticipating the move, sidestepped the larger man with practiced ease, delivering a controlled maneuver that left Artie stumbling and off balance. "Stay down," Victor barked, his gun now trained on the man. The clearing was still once more save for Karen's breathless curses and the frightened whispers of the teenagers. "Call the cops, Em," the boy finally stammered, breaking the tense silence. Victor, keeping his focus on the subdued aggressors, nodded curtly. "Good idea, make the call." His voice, though firm, held a note of reassurance meant for the kids. The stillness of the forest was broken by the sharp, authoritative voice of Victor as he called for police backup. His tone was calm but urgent, ensuring the dispatcher understood the severity of the situation. Karen, restrained on the ground, didn't take the opportunity for silence. Instead, she shrieked accusations, her words cutting through the forest air like jagged glass. "This is abuse. You're nothing but a power-tripping thug," she screamed, her voice raw with indignation. "I'll have your badge for this, you hear me? Your career is over." Nearby, Artie sat on the ground, his massive frame deflated after his failed assault. But even in his subdued state, his fury was palpable. His words were venomous, laced with promises of revenge. "You've made the biggest mistake of your life," he growled, his eyes boring into Victor with a dark intensity. "My family knows people, real people. You'll regret the day you messed with us." Victor ignored the threats, his focus sharp as he ensured the pair stayed subdued. He glanced toward the teenagers who stood huddled by the SUV. Their expressions were a mixture of fear and confusion, their usual teenage bravado stripped away by the chaos their parents had caused. "Are you two okay?" Victor asked, his voice softening momentarily. The boy nodded hesitantly, while the girl murmured something inaudible, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Victor could only hope they were calling for help, or someone more responsible than the two adults who had brought them into this mess. 15 minutes felt like an eternity, but finally the faint wail of sirens cut through the forest's natural symphony. The sound grew louder, more distinct, until two police vehicles emerged from the winding road, their blue and red lights casting flickering shadows against the trees. Victor exhaled, relief washing over him as the cavalry arrived. The officers who stepped out of the cars moved with practiced efficiency, their hands hovering near their holsters as they approached. "Officer Rubtsov?" one of them asked, his eyes scanning the scene. Victor nodded and provided a concise report. Two suspects attempted to trespass, one brandished a weapon, and both resisted arrest. The situation is under control, but they've been making threats since their detention. Karen, sensing an opportunity, began her tirade anew. "This man is a lunatic," she screeched. "He assaulted us. He pulled a gun on my family for no reason. You have to arrest him." Artie joined in, his voice booming. "You don't know who you're dealing with. This guy's a rogue cop. We'll see to it that he never works again." The officers exchanged glances, their faces unreadable, before addressing Victor. "We'll take it from here," one of them said, stepping forward to cuff both Karen and Artie. Their protests escalated into incoherent shouting as they were escorted to the patrol cars. The teenagers, meanwhile, were pulled aside for questioning. The girl hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. They told us not to say anything, but..." She glanced at her brother, who gave her an encouraging nod. "They didn't tell the truth." Their statements were riddled with contradictions, reflecting their fear of their parents and the pressure to do the right thing. But the officers were patient, extracting enough information to confirm Victor's account. As the patrol cars pulled away, the forest fell silent once more. Victor stood on the porch watching as the chaos receded into the distance. His shoulders relaxed slightly, but he knew this was far from over. The real battle had only just begun. The legal assault began almost immediately after Karen and Artie were released on bail. Their first move was to hire a high-profile legal team, the kind known for turning the tide of public opinion before a single step is taken in court. Within days, carefully crafted stories appeared in the media, painting Karen as a victim of police brutality and Artie as a concerned husband wrongfully detained. Headlines screamed about a rogue cop and a family's vacation ruined by violence. Victor, meanwhile, found himself thrust into a storm he hadn't anticipated. As a police officer with an impeccable record, he was accustomed to scrutiny, but this was different. The media frenzy grew by the day, fueled by Karen's dramatic interviews, where she tearfully recounted how her family was terrorized by an out-of-control officer. Artie added fuel to the fire, claiming Victor had pointed a gun at their children and threatened their lives. The pressure on Victor was immense. His department, keen to avoid accusations of bias, placed him on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The decision, though procedural, felt like a betrayal. Victor's colleagues were supportive, but their hands were tied. He spent his days confined to his home, watching as his reputation unraveled in real time. Friends and neighbors who once greeted him warmly now avoided eye contact, their gazes filled with doubt. Karen's legal team didn't stop at words. They provided the court with evidence that bolstered their claims. Photos surfaced showing Karen with a bruised wrist and a gash on her palm. Her lawyers argued that these injuries were inflicted during Victor's excessive force. Artie testified that Victor had verbally abused Karen, calling her derogatory names and threatening her life. The couple's narrative became increasingly elaborate, painting Victor as a volatile figure unfit for his role in law enforcement. The worst blow came when Karen and Artie accused Victor of threatening their children. "He pointed a gun at my daughter," Karen claimed in a tearful interview. "What kind of monster does that? My kids will never recover from this trauma." Victor knew the allegations were baseless, but proving that was another matter entirely. The court of public opinion had already passed judgment, and every new headline seemed to tighten the noose around his neck. His legal team, though competent, struggled to counter the relentless narrative spun by Karen's lawyers. As the weeks dragged on, Victor's isolation deepened. The cabin, once his sanctuary, now felt like a prison. His phone rang constantly, reporters seeking comments, former colleagues offering half-hearted condolences, strangers spewing venom or misguided support. Each call was a reminder of how far the situation had spiraled out of control, but Victor wasn't one to give up. He began meticulously gathering his own evidence, reviewing every detail of the incident. He knew the truth was on his side, but the truth alone wouldn't be enough. He needed proof, irrefutable proof, to dismantle Karen and Artie's web of lies. The legal battle was far from over, and Victor was prepared to fight. His integrity, career, and identity were on the line, and he refused to let a pair of entitled manipulators take them from him. Little did Karen and Artie know, their fortress of lies had cracks, and Victor was determined to expose every one of them. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source: Emma, Karen, and Artie's teenage daughter. Late one evening, Victor received a call from an unfamiliar number. On the other end of the line was Emma, her voice trembling, yet resolute. "I need to tell you the truth," she began, her words hesitant but sincere. Emma revealed the pressure she and her brother had faced to uphold their parents' fabricated story. "They made us lie," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But I can't do it anymore." What followed shocked Victor even more than her confession. Emma had secretly recorded her parents' conversations after the incident. "I thought maybe you'd need this," she said, sending the audio files to Victor's email. In the recordings, Karen's voice was unmistakable as she scoffed about how she'd threatened Victor with a knife. "It's all part of the game," Karen sneered. "He'll crack under the pressure." Artie's laugh followed, deep and mocking. "That cop didn't know who he was dealing with. We'll bury him in lawsuits." The recordings were a lifeline. Victor immediately turned the files over to his legal team, who moved swiftly to have them authenticated and submitted as evidence. The damning content dismantled Karen and Artie's narrative, exposing their malice and premeditated deceit. The defense crumbled under the weight of undeniable proof, their theatrics in the courtroom suddenly hollow and desperate. Public opinion, once overwhelmingly against Victor, shifted like a tidal wave. News outlets that had once vilified him now scrambled to cover the truth, airing excerpts of the recordings and condemning Karen and Artie's manipulations. The teenagers, previously portrayed as victims of Victor's supposed aggression, were now seen as victims of their own parents' schemes. Victor, though relieved, remained cautious. The battle was turning in his favor, but he knew the final victory was still ahead. However, for the first time since the ordeal began, he saw a glimmer of hope, a path to reclaiming his life and exposing the truth. There was silence in the courtroom as the judge delivered the verdict, each word sounding like a hammer blow. Karen Wilcox, once so smug and restrained, trembled as her sentence was read aloud. 7 years in prison for assault with a bladed weapon on a policeman, perjury, and threats. Her lawyer's feeble attempts to portray her as a victim were negated by incriminating audio recordings that left no room for doubt. Her face contorted with anger and disbelief as the bailiff stepped forward to take her out. Artie was next, his defiance replaced by sheer fear. The 5-year sentence for attempted assault, false accusations, and aiding and abetting threats seemed heavier to him than the chains he would soon put on. His bravado evaporated, leaving behind only the mask of a man who believed his arrogance would protect him from responsibility. The teenagers, Emma and Max, watched from the gallery, relief and sadness on their faces at the same time. The judge addressed them directly, recognizing their courage to speak out despite the enormous pressure from their parents. "You did the right thing," the judge said solemnly. "Your actions have ensured the triumph of justice." Emma and Max were placed under the care of their aunt and uncle, relatives who had been estranged from Karen and Artie for a long time due to their toxic behavior. The court's decision to remove the children from the influence of their parents was widely welcomed and seen as a step towards giving them a chance at a stable, honest life. When the courtroom was empty, Victor sat quietly, feeling the weight of the past months. Justice has been served, but the ordeal has left its mark. Although he was acquitted, he felt deeply exhausted, realizing how close he was to losing everything. Still, it was comforting to know that the truth had prevailed. A small crowd of fans and reporters gathered outside, eager to hear the statement. Victor approached them with his usual calmness. "It's been a difficult journey," he said in a flat voice. "But it's a reminder that honesty and perseverance matter. Justice is not always easy, but it is always worth fighting for." With that, he turned and walked away, ready to return to the shelter of his hut, a place that now looked even more like a symbol of fortitude and truth. As the dust settled, Victor found himself reflecting on the ordeal. The months of relentless pressure, public scrutiny, and legal battles had tested every ounce of his resolve. Yet through it all, he had held firm to his principles. He realized that integrity wasn't just a guiding value. It was a shield, protecting him from the storm of lies and deceit. His unwavering commitment to truth had carried him through. And now, his reputation restored, he returned to the police force with a renewed sense of purpose. Victor's colleagues welcomed him back with respect and admiration, acknowledging the strength it took to navigate such a trial. His experiences made him even more attuned to the complexities of justice, deepening his empathy for those fighting battles of their own. The ordeal, while grueling, had sharpened his character, leaving him stronger and more resilient. The story of Victor's struggle and triumph resonated far beyond the courtroom. News outlets that had once vilified him now celebrated his perseverance, turning the narrative into a cautionary tale about the dangers of entitlement and manipulation. Karen and Artie, once so confident in their ability to weaponize public perception, became infamous symbols of arrogance gone unchecked. Victor's vindication inspired others to speak out against injustice, proving that truth could prevail, even against formidable odds. Letters of support poured in from across the country, and strangers approached him in the street to thank him for standing strong. The public's faith in his integrity wasn't just restored, it was bolstered, turning him into a figure of quiet heroism. Returning to his mountain cabin felt like coming home in more ways than one. The isolation that had once offered only solace now carried a deeper meaning. Victor fortified the property, not out of fear, but as a reminder that peace often required vigilance. The cabin stood as a symbol of resilience, a place where he had faced his greatest challenge and emerged victorious. On quiet evenings, as the sun dipped below the treetops, Victor would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee in hand. The stillness of the forest, once disrupted, had returned, and with it, a sense of calm that could not be shaken. He often reflected on the events of that fateful day, not with bitterness, but with gratitude, for the lessons learned, the truths revealed, and the principles upheld. Though the scars of the ordeal remained, they were a testament to his strength. Victor knew he had faced the storm and come out stronger, and for that he felt a quiet pride. The cabin, much like Victor himself, stood resilient, a testament to the enduring power of truth and the unwavering strength of character.